Hi, everyone. Thank you for joining us for today's episode of our AI Talks, a Patrick J. McGovern Foundation live stream series that's engaging the civil society champions who are representing our human interests and aspirations in a tech-enabled world. Today, we have two special guests who are really paving the way for future generations in an AI world. As designers and builders, as problem solvers and creative thinkers, and as leaders who are ready to advocate for both people and planet. So welcome, Osi and Christina.
Hi, Yolanda. Good to meet
Hi.
you.
I'll do a quick introduction of you both. Osi Imeokparia is the CEO of Kode with Klossy, a 501c3 nonprofit focused on closing the gender gap in tech. Technology has been the through line in Osi's multi-sector career across for-profit, nonprofit, philanthropic, and political organizations. Before joining Kode with Klossy, Osi worked in philanthropy as the vice president of technology and head of justice and opportunity at the Chan Zuckerberg Initiative. Prior to that, Osi was the chief product officer for the Hillary for America presidential campaign from launch to election day. Before pursuing philanthropic and nonprofit work, Osi spent 15 plus years as a product leader in startup, midsize, and large for-profit software organizations. While at Google, Osi spent almost a decade working on ad technology. At eBay, she worked on seller and trust and safety products for the marketplace, and she began her career at a venture-backed collaboration software startup. And Christina Asquith is the co-founder of Hack Club. Prior to Hack Club, she was a journalist for 20 years, reporting on women's rights and education in more than 20 countries for news outlets like the New York Times and others. She's a two-time published author of nonfiction books, including an award-winning investigative memoir on her year as a public school teacher. Under her leadership, Hack Club has grown into the largest network of teen hackers in the world. Hack Club has reimagined an education system for the internet era without teachers, curriculum, or books that is truly equitable. Both very impressive backgrounds, and I'm excited to dive into how these experiences have sort of shaped your work and mission today. And for those of you who don't know me yet, my name is Yolanda Botti-Lodovico, and I'm the storytelling and advocacy lead here at the Patrick J. McGovern Foundation. I'm a policy expert by training, a human rights advocate, a writer, an AI for good enthusiast who's focused on amplifying the stories of leaders as they leverage AI to solve global challenges, empower communities, and shape a better future for everyone. But before I jump into our questions and the really rich discussion that we'll be having around AI education today, I want to frame a little bit for our audience why AI literacy, or rather AI fluency, is such a critical piece of our strategy here at PJMF. Our president, Vlastar, recently penned an op-ed in the Boston Globe in which he shares his experience of meeting with a group of high school students in Illinois, and he poses the question to them, what do you think an AI-powered future will look like? And one of the students responds quite astutely that it depends on us. Now, I encourage you all to read the full piece if you have time, but the important point here is that what an AI-enabled world will look like 10, 20 years in the future really depends on the decisions that every single one of us makes today. It depends on how prepared we are to navigate a sort of rapidly shifting AI ecosystem. And it depends on whether we're able to define for ourselves our own values and what kind of impact we want AI to have on our lives, on our children's lives, and on our communities. And to do that, every single one of us needs to have a level of AI fluency that gives us real agency and ownership, especially young people. So over to you both. This is actually a question for both of you. You lead organizations that help young people become informed and responsible participants in the AI ecosystem. So I want to hear from you both how you're preparing the next generation to really thrive in an AI-driven world. Let's start with Osi.
Sure. Good morning. I mean, this is such a top of mind topic, so I'm excited to be here to talk to you both about it. I think for us at Kode with Klossy, we are now a decade old as an organization, and so have been working specifically with young women who are passionate about technology and want to pursue technology as a career path. Or as an entrepreneurial path for the last decade. And so as we think about this AI inflection point, participation is so important, as you described, so that we have agency over the future we all will experience. And we think about specifically how we are building confidence in young women that that exploration of AI is not scary. right? I think there is a lot of subtle messaging that young women receive from the culture, I'll call it air quotes, about what they are capable of. And it's showing up in the early data, right? There are many, many early studies that show Gen Z women are almost 25% less likely to be experimenting with Gen AI in the workplace than their male counterparts. And so we're so early in this new inflection point, and yet we're seeing some of this behavior already seeping into outcomes. And so for us, what's really important, because we onboard young women into our community at the age of 13, and then they stay with us for a decade plus. We want to instill in those young people a sense of confidence, a sense of high agency, a sense of curiosity, a sense of possibility of failure, such that a hunger for technical literacy or fluency, a hunger for experimentation is embedded early in their blueprint and their experience of technology. And so that for us is sort of the core of how we think about it. And then obviously we have programming, which I can wax poetic on, but the core of it is how are we getting in early to disrupt some of the cultural wiring that might predispose young women in particular from playing with and experimenting with this technology.
That's incredible. Thank you for that. And I think the confidence piece really speaks to me, because how do we show up to this space being okay with failure and being okay with sort of shifting our focus and trying to learn things that don't come as easily to us at first. That's wonderful. Christina, over to you. Can you give us a little bit of background on what you do at Hack Club?
Sure. Thank you for having me. It's really great to be with both of you. I always love hearing from Osi, and couldn't support more her efforts and echo more the importance of the work that she's doing with young girls and getting them to feel confident enough to really become the architects that the world needs them to be with AI and computer science. Hack Club is 10 years old, and we have grown into the largest training center for high schoolers in computer science. The teenagers that are at Hack Club have been working in AI really since 2018. We began to see beta tests of ChatGPT in our online community. And, you know, where I think Hack Club is at right now with AI is really making sure that the young people are understanding the technical pieces that make up AI, that they're able to work in AI, both as architects, but also in using AI in coding and engineering. The girls piece of it, I think, comes in mostly around two areas. Like, one is AI awareness. So we're increasingly seeing the internet really being taken over by AI, from social media on through engineering, on through careers, through customer service. And there's definitely an element of lack of awareness amongst young people that they are talking to bots, for example, if they're on Instagram, or their feed is being affected by bots, driven by bots. And so we really do a lot of work with young people and helping them understand that there's a high chance in recognizing bots, and also in like recognizing text written by ChatGPT and how they use ChatGPT. So there's some AI awareness that we do. And I think the second piece of it is really helping young people become builders with AI, whether it's writing code with AI, which is 100% something we advocate for, and helping young people use AI to take a 40-hour coding task down to 1 hour. We're still seeing it as this incredible, powerful tool and bringing efficiency to their work. And then also in building the back end of AI, whether like deeply understanding what LLMs and databases are. And from there, they will begin to understand how those systems can become very inequitable very quickly, very sexist, very misogynistic, very racist. But you need to understand those kind of fundamentals before you get into how you can begin to correct them. So it's those two pieces. It's kind of AI awareness, and then it's understanding the architecture of AI so they can become the creators of it.
Yeah, the phrase we use at Kode with Klossy for that concept is this idea of how can we make sure that our community can both be responsible creators of AI and discerning and critical users, right? So as Christina said, it's that duality of archetype that we hope springs forth from our community. Whether you end up being a machine learning engineer is one thing, but all of us need to have that sort of basic discernment and critical usage. And so, you know, part of our programming, for instance, in our flagship 2-week program, we have this curriculum within a curriculum called the culture of tech. So not only are you learning about how LLMs work and how AI sort of is architected and some of those concepts, but you're also learning, as Christina mentioned, about the ethics, about the bias, about how you as a creator can influence and shape the way that these technologies impact the world. So it's not just sort of a myopic view of technology, but it's an outward facing, world impacting view of technology that we try to instill in our participants as well. Yeah.
That's wonderful. And I definitely want to get into that a little bit more later in the conversation. And it's interesting, you both have been around for about 10 years, if I'm not mistaken, which kind of shows how important AI and these sort of STEM disciplines have become during that time. And I think it's interesting to see how, since the advent of ChatGPT in 2023, we're seeing more and more of this push for school systems around the world to incorporate some form of AI education so they can be just that, responsible and informed consumers, users, and even builders of AI. Thinking about the recent White House executive order, part of which called for the creation of AI learning and certification opportunities for high school students. Here at the foundation, we partner with a number of different organizations in addition to the two of yours, like AI EDU, that are building curricula to advance AI literacy and AI readiness across K through 12 institutions. But I do want to talk about the importance of sort of these informal learning settings, particularly for children learning about AI. So to the both of you, let's start with Osi. Why is it so important for young people to also have opportunities to engage with AI in not just formal but informal settings?
Yeah, I mean, I love this question. Kode with Klossy is an out-of-school program. And I think part of the remit that we think about is not just what they're learning, but how young people are learning. And so infusing rigor with joy, infusing rigor with relationship building is part of what our formula and our approach is. And so I just think that sort of an out-of-school program, we have the ability to be a little more agile than sort of formal institutions in terms of how we can be responsive to the shifts in the technology landscape. But outside of that, I think from a young person's beneficial point, we talk a lot about how you can connect your curiosity about technology to things that you're passionate about. And you can explore through those passions and curiosities technology, right? So if you're interested in art, you can infuse that with technology, and sports and technology, and art and music and technology, right? All of these things that capture the minds of young people who, again, are sort of in this critical identity formation phase, can be useful fodder for then making sure there's long-term interest planted when they are starting to explore technology. And so we use our role as an out-of-school program to really dig into this concept of passion and exploring those passions through our programming.
I love that. Christina, over to you.
Yeah, well, I would say the probably significant, unique, like the most significant unique aspect of Hack Club is its peer-to-peer structure. So I think we're so early days in teaching AI literacy, and what the school districts are doing right now and the state departments of education, I'd be really interested in seeing it. I'm sure it's going to change a lot in 6 months, in a year. And the other thing I'm sure about is that the teenagers are way ahead of the teachers and the policymakers in this. And that's not a slight. It's just that they're online all the time, and they're so quick, and they learn so fast. So, where I think Hack Club is playing a really useful role is by creating essentially an online campus for young people interested in this, right? So we could all be learning anything we need to learn right now in our bedrooms on our laptops, right? We have the whole of human history and knowledge in computers, but we still travel to campus and we still congregate in spaces. And then we get so much out of those little informal conversations. And that's what Hack Club essentially is. It's an enormous gathering of 13 to 18-year-olds from around the world, both in our online Slack community, which has about 60,000 teenagers. And then we gather students in hackathons for 12 to 42 hours, about, dozens of times a year. So it's in those informal settings where they're talking to each other, where they're sharing what they built and how they built it, where they're live coding alongside each other, where exchanges of information happen really fast and really fluidly. And they are literally reading whatever came out they're probably reading on hackernews.com, the latest information, they're chatting about it online. And I think that because the technology is moving so fast, but also just because of human nature's inclination to learn informally from each other, I think that's a really good complement to the more formal structures that they get from school systems, and through somewhat the 2-week setting at Code with Klossy, although that there's both of those things going on there.
Yeah. I mean, I could go on all day about my admiration for the peer-to-peer structure of Hack Club. I think it's a wonderful way for young people to, again, I'm going to say the word for the third time, to have a sense of agency around their understanding of technology and their ability to have control over how it shows up in their life. I think that's wonderful. And I think our version of that in Code with Klossy is we have a program that we call our instructor assistants. And so we do work with K through 12 educators. We train them on our curriculum to deliver it as the sort of lead instructors. But to Christina's point, there's so much value in that peer learning environment. And so our instructor assistants are 18-plus-year-old members of our community who come back, get trained by Code with Klossy on the technical curriculum, and then help us as near peer leaders in our programs to deliver the technical curriculum. Mm-hmm. And so not only are you getting both sort of what I would say like formal instruction, we have deep respect for the craft of educators. And so that is certainly part of what we do at Code with Klossy. But as Christina mentioned, the sort of peer learning environment is also really formative. And so our version of that is the instructor assistant program. And that's super powerful because much like a teaching assistant in university, that can set the tone for your learning journey. And so our IAs play a very critical role in what we believe to be the success and the longitudinal nature of our programming. We meet you 13 to 18, you age with us as you continue that educational journey, you become an IA. And so you're reinforcing your technical skills, both as a receiver of that wisdom to start with, and then helping us to then work with your peers to bring up the next cohort. So I love the peer-to-peer aspect of that because I concur with Christina. It's so critical to have that, and you can really do that in an out-of-school context.
Yeah, I think that community building piece is so important, especially when we're in a time where kids are sort of feeling more and more disconnected from each other. I'm thinking about a study that I think was done by UC San Francisco with the support of NIH. And it basically found that as kids' social media usage rose from 7 to 73 minutes a day, their symptoms of depression went up by 35%. And that was actually a longitudinal study done over a period of, I think, 6 years. So some of this might be correlation, some of it might be causation, but I think the real point here is that we want to set a different precedent for the age of AI, and shaping the AI ecosystem is something that can bring young people together in creative ways is almost revolutionary in a way. And it's kind of a nice segue to the topic of AI equity, which at its core means that every person should be included in this new world that we're building. So I know this is near and dear to both of your hearts, and it's, of course, a very important part of the work we do at PJMF. Back to Christina, I'm wondering if you have an extensive background as a journalist, sort of specializing in women's issues. And you mentioned that you also have this passion for history when we first spoke. So you've really studied in depth how different societal shifts have affected women and girls around this world. I'd love to hear more from you. Tell us how this experience has influenced your own priorities at Hack Club and why it's so critical to ensure that women and girls have equitable pathways to engage with and shape AI.
Sure. Well, I'll start by drawing from my experience as a public school teacher. I taught sixth grade in North Philadelphia in 1999 in the school that was considered the least desirable school amongst teaching staff. So there were openings because no other teacher would go there. And it was from that experience that I really realized that we would never resolve equity issues through a school system that was entirely segregated by real estate prices. And until we move away from a system where schools are entirely funded by, not funded, but are entirely segregated by your ability to purchase a home inside that district, which good schools are, $500,000 at the beginning, you're never going to be able to truly provide an equitable education or give the kids from lower income backgrounds a real chance. And AI is not going to change that. It's like only going to exacerbate it. Like AI will exacerbate every existing inequality or every existing privilege. So, when I started working at Hack Club, there were only the founder and one other person there. It was really the structure of the organization that inspired me to believe that this could be a way to truly reach the kids that were so marginalized at that point that like nothing going through policy channels or education channels or curriculum channels could really reach them. And a couple things that we do, I think, have been key in allowing people from every background to access Hack Club's programs and really thrive in their own way. So to start with, Hack Club's totally free, but it's not just that it doesn't charge you to come in. We run an online community, so if you have an internet access and a laptop, like you can participate the same as everyone else. All of our in-person events, we provide travel stipends and housing. So if you can code well enough to get there, you're in, and there's zero cost to you. And a huge portion of our budget goes to that experience. But what we discovered that we weren't expecting to from that process was that travel for kids from lower income backgrounds or marginalized community was actually a huge part of the confidence, of the awareness increasing, and of the kind of like breaking out of whatever mental trap that they were in from their economic situation. We also learned that bringing kids together from different backgrounds was critical in creating opportunities for kids from lower income backgrounds. So just sitting next to a kid who college admissions counselor, who travels a ton to Europe, who understands all the different programs at the colleges was really, really effective in opening up that person's mind to opportunities made available to them. So these were some of the things. And when it comes to girls, like really we learned about a couple of years ago that we needed to bring girls together, which is like the Code with Klossy model, in order to really help them gain confidence. We needed to make sure that they were put in leadership positions. If you just put them in a group, they might not take that leadership position or be pushed out of it. So we created hackathons where girls had to lead. And then the third thing, which is what we rolled out this year, is we are requiring girls to fully deploy and ship their technical projects. It is not enough to come and study coding. You have to finish your project and get it online. That is a final step that most girls do not take, especially compared to boys. It's like if you were going to do a lemonade stand, you make lemonade, but you never sell a single cup. You have to sell that cup. You have to have that stand. You have to launch your business. So that's what the project we're doing right now is, and we're looking to get 1,000 girls to finish that final step. And we think that is going to make a huge difference, but we will know more at the end of the year.
Yeah, I think, again, Christina, echo. I think what's really wonderful about that to hear echoed in your programming, which I knew, but we'll just name here, is that all of Code with Klossy's programming is also experiential and project-based. So you walk out with a concrete manifestation of the learning that you did. To your point, you're not just studying it to studying it, you are studying it to produce something, which gives you an artifact that is evidence of your growth, of your learning, and of the experience, which I think is really powerful. And then I think the piece of it that, to this point about mixing of lived experiences, which again, I think is really a wonderful results of being out of school programming, is exactly the same thing you described, which is at Code with Klossy, roughly 40% of the young people who onboard with us qualify for free and reduced lunch, which, as your audience knows, and as both of you know, is a signal of socioeconomic need. And so, we have 60% of those in our community who didn't come with those indicators, 40% who do. So you're really rubbing shoulders with people across political lines, across socioeconomic lines. 80% of the young people in our Code with Klossy programs identify as people of color. So there really is a tapestry of the world in which you are joined in common cause in learning and producing an end result that is a manifestation of your growth and of your learning journey. And I think that is a really powerful thing to have happen. And we've seen that over the last decade in our work, that's that cornerstone of having the common cause not be around identity. So you have lots of blended lived experiences in our community is a really powerful thing.
I love that. And that sort of those points of connection that sort of make people feel like they have shared goals and they can work together to achieve them and actually produce a final product that makes a difference within their communities is so incredible to me, and something that we're really excited about enabling at PJMF. I think another important point that's good for these girls to see at a young age is that women are already shaping our AI future in really meaningful ways. And they have a pathway to become just like those women, right? To make their own marks in their communities. I think of folks like Dr. Joy Buolamwini, Dr. Feifei Lee, Dr. Timit Jabru, Dr. Ruha Benjamin, and others, right? And part of AI equity is recognizing and celebrating these contributions and really listening to the women as they discuss the challenges and opportunities ahead. So while we continue to see these sort of gender gaps in AI and in computer science participation, we know that many women like the two of you are laying the groundwork for this to change in the future. And this brings me back to another question. Osi, I know that you yourself have background as a woman in tech. You are a leader in tech. And I'm curious how that experience has really guided your approach and your commitment to working with these girls and creating a more gender equitable AI future.
Yeah. So I love that list of names that you listed out, because I think what is reflective of that is the deeply technical women who are, again, at the cutting edge of this field. Again, as you mentioned, Dr. Feifei Lee, Dr. Joy Buolamwini, I would add Mira Murati to that list, right? So you have these women who have technical backgrounds who are leading at the frontier. I did also want to note, again, coming back to this duality that we think about at Kode with Klossy, you can be the creator and be that deeply technical person, but you can also leverage your fluency to also be as equally influential. So that's people like May Habib, that's people like Daniela Omedai at Anthropic, right? You have women who didn't necessarily have the deep technical background as Dr. Feifei Lee has, but are using their ability to be curious and have a growth mindset and learn the technology in sufficient enough ways to also have their influence. So that duality of archetype, I think, is really important. Now, coming back to me, I think one of the reasons why this job is so fulfilling is that it is a manifestation of my own lived experience as a woman, as a Black woman in technology, right? I was our community. I was that 13-year-old. I was that 17-year-old. I was that 18-year-old at university who did her first computer science class and was the only one in the room that looked like her, right? And so I have a lived experience that I think informs how I think about what the right levers of change are and what the right diagnosis of the problem is. I will remind our audience that we've been talking about the gender gap in technology for 30, 40 years, and we have not still made enough progress. And so why is that, right? How can I use my understanding of this as a lived experience to help inform new solutions? And so I think it's powerful to combine my lived experience with the enormous data set, both anecdotal stories we get from our community, as well as the data that we have as we follow these young people from 13 to 22. Like, we have people like Cameron in our community who we met at 14 is now graduating at 22 and going into a software engineering role. Well, what are the pathway markers that made Cameron retained on that journey? How can we aggregate those insights across our community and actually have recommendations to policymakers that help inform what we do? So I don't want to say that everything we do is anchored in my lived experience. I certainly have a passionate perspective based on that lived experience, but then we also inform it with the anecdotes and stories from our community, as well as the data and insights we can glean from our community as well. But I would say for me, what I know to be true is that it is not sufficient for us to invest in the credentialing and the skill building of individuals. There are structural and systemic reasons why this gender gap has been persistent. And so it's a both and proposition for us at Kode with Klossy. How do we continue to invest in the talent, the enormous talent that we have that comes to us ready to learn, ready to engage, and totally desirous of staying in this industry? How do we continue to pour into them as individuals? But then how are we looking around and lifting our head up and saying, well, what are the structures that might create headwinds for this talented young person to actually achieve that ambition? So how are we working with educators? How are we working with our corporate partners to think about the conditions of success, not just about creating these massively skilled young people that don't then have the structures and systems to support their outcomes?
I think those are all great points. And two things that stood out to me is I appreciate that you brought up this sort of duality of how we're training children to sort of thrive in an AI future. It's either as creators and builders, but also as decision makers and folks who are sort of shaping this new society that's informed by AI. And that's such an important piece. The other thing is that I think a lot of these lessons that you're talking about, sort of building structures and having this be a society-wide effort, also applies to other marginalized communities, not just women and girls. So of course, like you mentioned, BIPOC communities, people with disabilities, LGBTQ individuals, all of these folks need to be fully included in this sort of AI revolution that we're building together. So I wonder if I could come back to you, Christina, on a societal level, do you have anything to add to that, how we can create inroads to ensure that all underrepresented communities have equitable opportunities to create, lead, and shape an AI future?
I mean, I really love what Osi said, and I really appreciate the way that she continues to call out the change that's needed on both those levels. We definitely have a generation of highly perfectionist girls that are just getting better and better and better. And if we're not, if we're just pushing them towards the glass ceiling, like that's going to hurt even harder. It's such a huge topic, Yolanda. Like, I think that we're in a moment right now where we're seeing a resurgence of sexism against young women. And it's at the same time that we're seeing them becoming more skilled than ever, right? I think probably the two things that over the course of recent history that have worked in those moments for women and have pushed them forward, as someone who's been thinking about women's rights for like 35 years, I guess, is one, technology. I think technology has, over the course of the last century, played probably a bigger role than anything else in advancing women, whether it's like the washing machine or birth control or Twitter, which for me personally in 2013, like I felt like I was all by myself screaming into the ether about the absence of women in foreign policy and the absence of women at war. And Twitter came along and we all met. And I know that's what fueled me too. And it was that ability to talk to each other finally and connect with each other. Whereas before we thought we were the only ones. Just one small example, but I think technology can play this enormous role as a tool to continue to push forward women's rights and equality for all people, and mostly, more than anything, by making sure everybody has a voice. And then I think the other thing that's really key is going to be the ability for women, but also like all disadvantaged groups, to meet each other and to connect and to form friendships and to work together. And the ability to do that, I think, advanced by technology, is going to be really important. And I think as AI is utilized like increasingly in negative ways, I think it's going to be the ability of people to come together and talk. And I think increasingly in person, because the internet is being destroyed by AI right now in the same way that like junk mail has destroyed our postal service. I think in the next 6 months to a year, you're going to see AI really destroy like social media feeds and just make them unusable. And people are going to start to gravitate to new places. I'm already seeing it like on my social media feeds. The importance of like in-person meetups. I think it's going to be like Generation Meetup, where we're physically getting together. One of the only ways you're not talking to a bot, but also like, that's great. Small communities, physical communities, connecting in person. I think that's going to be the reaction to AI amongst young people, especially. And the more we do that, and the more we make sure those in-person meetups are diverse, and we're humanizing each other by talking to each other, like the harder it's going to be, racist, sexist, and the rest of the things. So I hope that answered your question, but that's kind of where Hack Club is going in terms of our programming. And I think that that's going to be like just a more positive future.
No, it absolutely does. And I think it brings us back to something that I said at the beginning about the piece that our president at PJMF wrote, where one of the students had mentioned that how AI impacts the world and our communities and how we connect with each other depends on us. So hopefully, if we can reshape AI to sort of connect us in stronger ways, as opposed to sort of breaking down social connection, then we can create a better future. But that's to be determined. That, again, depends on us. I want to shift
the way that you're seeing that. Like, I've really appreciated how Code with Klossy is growing to more and more in-person meetups as well. And I think that the young people are going to want that even more as they see their online spaces deteriorate quickly. And also programs like Code with Klossy that gatekeep who comes in, meaning you have to be a real human and you have to actually be a 14-year-old girl. And Code with Klossy provides that service of like certifying that. I think those kinds of things are also going to play huge like positive tooling around supporting young people to actually like meet each other and connect authentically.
Yeah.
The one thing I'll add, which I think is an important note, is that Code with Klossy, we talk about the fact that our programs are designed and centered for young women. But we have had young men who feel comfortable with that being the design center participate in our program. So we're really open to anyone who is in common cause with this idea of supporting women in tech. And so if you're red, purple, blue, male, female, trans, or other, if you identify with that as a value proposition that you support, you're sort of welcome in the pond with us. So I just wanted to make that quick note.
That's excellent. Awesome. So all great points. I actually want to move on to a topic that I think Osi might have brought up earlier and Christina has brought up as well, and that's preparing young people to engage with AI in ethical ways and responsible ways. And when I think about AI's impacts on climate or the risks around bias and privacy concerns, those are really top of mind for children in particular and the next generation who will take this sort of future forward. Starting with Osi, at Code with Klossy, you said you had programs that really specifically address the context in which technology is used. Tell us about these programs and how are you teaching young people to be responsible stewards of an AI-driven future?
Yeah, so I would say it's not actually a standalone program. It's sort of infused into the approach and the pedagogy we have overall in each of our different programs, right? And so specifically to name it again, it's this concept that we call culture of tech. And it's a curriculum within our curriculum, which is to say you're just learning data science or you're learning the fundamentals of AI and machine learning. That's all wonderful and great. And we can talk about spurious relationships. We could talk about how these data sets interact. In addition to all this technical knowledge you are gaining, let's ground you in the context, because technology does not exist in a vacuum and it's not created by nameless, faceless people, right? How this technology shows up in the world is important. And so that's really what the culture of tech curriculum is really about, curriculum within our curriculum. And so we cover things like not only talking about gender representation and maybe what a shift, right? We talk about the fact that 37% of computer science degrees in 1985 were earned by women. How are we now in the year of our Lord 2025 back to 20% of CS degrees being earned by women? What are some of the factors that influence that? We talk about in a recommendation algorithm, how the inputs of your data actually influence what is recommended. And we show that not only through a discussion, but also through examples that we can sort of teach that show up in their real life. Again, connecting the abstract to the reality of their experience, I think is really important in these discussions. But then we sort of talk about the things that are challenging and hard, but then we try to, again, always end with some form of agency. So what can your role be in addressing or changing or shifting some of the things that you might have heard that are a little scary or a little concerning? How do you walk out with a sense of agency around that? And so that's really sort of the culture of tech ethos that we have. And that, again, sort of shows up in all of our different programming.
I love that. And I think the fact that you keep repeating this word agency is so poignant for our audience, because it's an important topic and we need children and young people to be showing up to this future feeling like they're empowered to make a difference and they're empowered to decide how AI affects the world around them. Christina, over to you, thinking about how sort of teachers and administrators can show up for their students in this space in ways that keep them safe but don't stifle their growth or AI learning. You mentioned that some schools are responding to the ethical challenges that AI poses with decisions to just sort of ban the use of AI in the classroom when we had first met, or ban phones and other electronics. And I recently spoke with one of our partners in Brazil, and they're also grappling with similar decisions within the school system and how damaging those can be. And I wonder, As a former teacher yourself, what's your perspective on the potential impacts of these policies?
Well, I think what I was referring to is that a lot of schools don't allow teenagers or students to access code editors, which is like taking away their notepads. You can't really code without a code editor. And, the schools don't have necessarily the technical acumen to understand the difference between pieces of software and why you might need a code editor. And I guess it just speaks to like my general concern about trying to roll out like a technical education through the public school system. I think it could be done well, but I think also there's a chance that it is done terribly. Like when I was teaching, we were going through bilingual education, which was such an enormous failure that left a lot of immigrant kids unable to speak either language. And it was, I also went through the testing thing of the Bush administration where everyone was suddenly being tested. And there's a lot of trends in education. And, to expect school teachers, I have 3 children in the public schools. They are overloaded as it is. To add on AI and to add on computer science, I think it can work. But I'm just a little cautious about expecting schools to do too much and then also expecting to be delivered in a way that not only is high quality, but also keeping pace with how fast things are changing, which is why I think the things like Code with Klossy and outside programs like Hack Club really complement that. And I'm also like kind of fine with banning things like AI and phones in school. I think there's probably only 4 to 5 hours max of learning time in every school day. And that's like maximum in between everything else. So you've got all those other subjects to get to. And I think, teenagers can learn these things outside of school. Obviously, both Osi and I are like huge proponents of inspiring young people to want to tap into their natural inclination to want to create and build. And coding is just a means to that. So if you tap into that internal flame to want to create and build and see something in the world and not tell them what it needs to be, but allow them to make it relevant for them, it could be like my 9-year-old wanted to create a lock to keep her little sister out of her bedroom. And she like actually coded it. So it's voice activated. Like, I'm not like goes to climate change. Like, let's start with that. That's actual some real Python and some real hardware and Arduinos. So like, let them do that, right? It's the building blocks. And let's not be too like 30,000 feet about like worrying that they need a gigantic like computer science curriculum. I think there's a way to do it well. I'm just like trying to be a little bit nuanced about it.
Mm-hmm. Osi, I'm curious if you have any thoughts or responses to that.
Oh, I mean, look, I think, so I was never an educator, so I don't have that experience to pull from. But I think just observationally, we work, as I mentioned, at Code with Klossy with K through 12 educators for our onboarding programs. We take them through our technical curriculum and train them, not just on sort of the technical piece, but sort of what it means to deliver a Code with Klossy learning experience. How we teach is just as important as what we teach. And so we're really proud of our sort of teacher training and professional development around that. I think to Christina's point, it can work, right? We have seen Code with Klossy instructors who learn to code or learn technology through Code with Klossy take that back into their classrooms and infuse that with the lessons and the education that they're doing in traditional public schools, right? So we are out of school, we teach and train them, and then the ripple effects of our impact is that they're able to take that back into their schools. But it does take a special teacher who is creating hours in their day to do this. And right to Christina's point, in order for this to be successful, we can't just say we want it. We have to properly resource teachers and pay them what they're worth to make sure that these things are successful. So look, I think education and education reform is a long running topic, bigger and above my pay grade, but I can just talk about sort of the small experiences we have in proximity to the educators that we work with. And there's an appetite for it, but it certainly requires investment. And you have to value and show through the supports that you create that you value the educators and that you're willing to sort of disrupt some of the shoulda, need to, have to frameworks that prevent some of this innovation from happening to actually have it be successful. So I support what Christina is saying in many ways. It is complex. And I think we have reason through history to be skeptical about some of these things. But we have just seen so many wonderful educators come through our program, get that knowledge, and then being able to transfer it and see those ripples. So I remain optimistic and hopeful, but certainly it is a tough system to change. Again, these are sort of the structures and systems that aren't necessarily creating the conditions for success, and those need to shift if we're going to have this work take sustainable root in our society, as opposed to sort of sparks of brilliance.
It is indeed a tough system to change. And I think it's clear from what you're both saying that there's a lot of institutional changes that need to be made, but also sort of institutional alignment across sectors for AI fluency to really be an achievable goal that every kid has access to. And I'm curious, given that this is such a big task and different stakeholders have different views on the best way to get there, who are your allies in this effort, and which allies would you like to see sort of join the fold? Christina, we can start with you.
Well, I mean, when I started the Fuller Project, which was a nonprofit to get more women in journalism, I spent a couple of years probably talking mostly to myself and a handful of people that already agreed with me. What we really needed to be talking to was the gatekeepers inside newsrooms in positions of power, which often were men, but not always, but probably 80%. And I think, and so I came up with a strategy of holding dinners across in cities across the US and inviting all those editors, and we would pay for the dinners and everyone have a great time and network. And then, at some point it'd be like clink on the glass and you get to stand up and talk to them about the facts and how underrepresented women were in the news. And I think that probably more than anything was the impact and the legacy of my last nonprofit organization, which was bringing together people that weren't against you, but didn't really even understand or have on their radar screen the importance of the things you were talking about. And doing it in a social setting where people weren't being browbeaten or shamed for how bad they were for not agreeing with you. So, like a huge proponent of partnerships. And Hack Club wouldn't have any girls in it at all, because we don't start until high school, if not for like the groundbreaking work of organizations like Girls Who Code, which starts young. Tons of research has shown internationally that if you wait until a girl's 15, like to introduce an idea to her, like you could be an engineer, like the funnel is so narrow. So many of those girls have already dropped out. We learned that actually through efforts to prevent teen pregnancy, that you needed to start those efforts at 9, like talking to them at 9. If you waited until 18 for family planning, like it was way too late. We learned that about 25 years ago. So like, it's the same thing. We really build on the shoulders of lots of organizations. So like Girls Who Code, a huge number of girls that go through Code with Klossy get that structured learning where they're heads down for 10 hours a day or so with instructors and really, really learn. And they come out of that and they're absolutely ready to do independent work. And they would not be able to do that without Code with Klossy, just one of the many things they do. There's also like Girl Scouts, which we partner with, which works very young, First Robotics. And then there's lots of very small organizations that work regionally in communities of need, like Mission Bits, the Knowledge House in Brooklyn, Code Crew in Tennessee, Launchpad Philly in Philadelphia. They have like 80 students learning Python, and they're incredible. And they're scattered across the US. So we're trying to bring all those groups together. And I think only when we all come together will we even move the needle a little bit. But there's no way that one organization can make that much change on its own, I think.
I think that's right. I think one of the fun things moving from the for-profit sector into the nonprofit space has been, I think about, the perspective on competition is very different. We need, linked arms and not sharp elbows, as Christina points out. And so not any one organization can't reform structures in this way. And also, research shows that the more exposure points, the more programs you do, the more likely you are to be retained on that journey. And so to Christina's point, the young people that are part of the Code with Klossy community use our community as a home base, but they certainly do Hack Club. They certainly do Girls Who Code. They certainly do other things that deepen their love of technology. And again, sustain them on this very long journey that has headwinds in its current instantiation. And so this idea of sort of a tapestry of programs that help influence and shape that journey, I think is really important. And then so since we've talked about sort of that part of allyship, I think for me, again, when we think about what is the diagnosis, again, we've been talking about gender equity for 30 years. You look at the data, you look at the access that code.org has created to fundamental computer science education. Despite that, in the same high school, boys are twice as likely to take computer science as their high school peers who are women or young girls. Why is that? So it's not an access thing. It's, women are getting 60% of undergraduate degree. Like, we are educated, we are ambitious. There is something else that is causing us not to have the retention and not to have the representation and decision-making power in this industry. And for us, that diagnosis is that it's a culture problem.
Mm.
So when we think about the allies that are going to help us to address what our diagnosis of the root cause is, it's people who shape culture, right? It's people who shape pop culture and what our idea of what young women look like, feel like, talk like, are interested in if they're pursuing technology. And then we embed in this conversation about culture, also corporate culture, right? So it's pop culture and corporate culture, and who are the people that are shaping process and policy and practice within companies. And so these culture movers, whether they're corporate culture movers or sort of society and pop culture movers, those are other allies that we believe we need at Code with Klossy to truly understand and to truly shift the fundamental issue that we believe is causing this gender gap to be so persistent. So yeah, that would be what I would round out the allyship conversation with.
Yeah, I love that. I think you're both making very good points. So popular culture change, we need corporate culture change. Obviously, we need policy change. I come from a policy background, so I'm always thinking about that. And now that I'm working in a philanthropy, I'm thinking about how philanthropy can play an important role as sort of a bridge between innovation and proof of concept and long-term policy change. And that could, of course, look like making sure every K through 12 institution has sort of curricula supporting AI literacy, or even providing additional resources to sort of community-led institutions, after-school programs like yours, libraries, learning resources so that other folks who are affected by the digital divide can actually have access to these resources. But it's clear that this needs to be a multi-sectoral effort for us to succeed. We have a few questions coming into the chat. I encourage folks to share more. We might have time for a couple of questions, and then we will leave the chat open afterwards. So if anyone would like to go in and provide some answers. But this is a question from one of our audience members. Can you kindly share recommendations for free courses or trainings where young women can build their knowledge and skills in AI? Anyone can jump in.
Well, as a former Googler, I have to shout them out. They have this program called the Google Career Certificates Program. And I think last year they launched their AI literacy certificate. So that was a place. I think Coursera is also great for some of these. So yeah, those are two that I would shout out, but definitely Google Career Certificates. If you just, again, want to satiate an initial curiosity that might lead you to other resources later, that's a great place to start.
So, Christina.
Yeah, I would just add on. I mean, if you're thinking about a teenager in your life, or you're a teenager yourself, a young woman, I mean, the first step I would say would be to join Hack Club and come into the online community, and then just ask the community what they've done. There's 10,000 teenagers there, so they're always exchanging ideas. But things I've seen in that community are like everything from MIT's summer program called Beaverworks, so that'd be next year, to regional programs, like I mentioned, if you're in Philadelphia or Brooklyn or Tennessee, there's like regional programs, they're free. There's obviously Code with Klossy and Girls Who Code, and I believe the summer program for Girls Who Code is still open, the summer online program. It might be. I don't know about Code with Klossy if they're full yet.
Yeah, we said waitlist, but I'm assuming this is not a young person. Maybe that's a bad assumption, but I assume this might be an older adult. But if it is a young person, Code with Klossy waitlist is still open.
Yeah, it says for young women. I mean, obviously YouTube. I mean, I would say most Hack Clubbers start on YouTube. And even just asking in the online community at Hack Club, like what YouTube videos are good, can help you sort through like 1,000 of them, things like that.
Yeah. I mean, again, just to sort of talk our own book for a second, I think that part of what has been great about the internet is the availability and democratization of learning in general. So we've just shouted out a bunch of different ways you can learn. I will say that the value added of learning in community is actually persistence. Online completion rates for courses are pretty low. It takes a very special kind of person to have the persistence to get through that. So if you are that person, more power to you. But part of our value added is that you are learning in community. You are learning with like-minded, like-ambitioned people. That is part of the value proposition of what Kode with Klossy does. So again, if you are a 13 to 18-year-old and you want to join our community, we have our wait list open. If you're older, again, these other resources that we just talked about exist for you.
Awesome. Well, I think we are coming up to the end of our discussion, and I want to give both of you the opportunity to share some closing thoughts. And I have a question for you, but if you have any other thing that you want to share with the audience, you can always feel free to answer that question instead. But what's your biggest hope, briefly, for future generations when it comes to AI? Christina, let's start with you.
Just what comes to mind is like teenagers are capable of incredible things. And we shouldn't hold them back. We should encourage them.
Awesome. I love that. Osi, how about you?
I think that what is my greatest hope and what I want. So we are 10 years into this work. I think as we reflect and think about the next 10 years, success looks like us shifting of a mentality of sort of zero-sum value, right? There is space at this proverbial table for all of us, and thinking about how technology can reflect the world around it, I think is my greatest hope. And that we sort of break out of this dichotomy. If you're there, I can't be there. There's space for lots of voices, lots of lived experiences, to make sure that the technology we're building is solving problems that only people with a specific lived experience might even see or see as valuable to solve. And I think that will make all of us better for it.
Awesome. Thank you so much to both of you for such a truly enlightening and inspiring discussion today. We talked about the role of informal versus formal learning settings on the journey to sort of broad-based AI fluency. We broke down the concept of AI equity and how to get there. And we talked about the sort of collaborative multi-stakeholder effort that will be necessary to really get us to a world where every child feels empowered to engage and shape AI for the betterment of their lives and their communities. So thanks again to both of you for being so generous with your experience and insights. And thank you to our audience as well. We appreciate you tuning in, and we look forward to seeing you all next time. Bye, everyone.
Thank you so much, Yolanda. Take care, Osi.
Christina. Bye, Yolanda.